This episode of the Guitar Speak podcast is brought to you by the Michael Dolce 2016 Funk Fusion Masterclass. Check this out.
Hi guys, this is Michael Dolce inviting you to my 2016 Funk Fusion Masterclass Tour. To give you a brief rundown of what the night consists of, we get 10 players in a room in a really relaxed atmosphere, nothing too intimidating. We cover soloing over the one-chord vamp. I will be sharing all my concepts that have worked for me over the years and I still use to this very day. The idea is to show you guys these ideas and apply them to your own voice. If you feel that you know how to play a pentatonic scale and a major scale, that's all you really need. If you're interested in attending the class, you can book through my website at www.michaeldolcemusic.com. So I look forward to chatting with you all and hopefully catch you at my next masterclass. Cheers for now, guys.
Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling and thank you so much for joining me. Alright, last week's episode with Andy Timmons, the response has been fantastic, thank you so much. I was stoked to talk to Andy and it was such a great conversation, and he played some live guitar for us and kindly allowed us to play some of his new album, which was so cool. So yeah, man, if you haven't heard that episode yet, get into our archives. It's not even that old, it's just last week. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, or go to guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com and you can get the Andy Timmons interview and all of our other interviews. We've had a couple of guitar building companies and luthiers on the show. We spoke to David Stedman from Maidson Guitars, the great Australian company celebrating their 70th birthday this year. One of our very first episodes was with my friend Pat Keegan from Pat Keegan Guitars. I own a Pat Keegan guitar, that's why I got him on. Little news flash, I played my Pat Keegan Telemaster last night at a gig, sporting its new rosewood board neck, which was great. Oh man, loved it. Pat, thank you. I love that guitar. Alright, so we've got another luthier on today, Jon Sullivan from Sully Guitars. I first heard of Sully through the Amps and Axes podcast, which is a really great show. When I found out Sully was bringing some of his guitars to Australia through an amazing partnership he's working on with Grover Jackson, the Grover Jackson, now from GJ2 Guitars, I thought I need to have this guy on. This is part one of my two-part conversation with Jon Sullivan from Sully Guitars. Okay, Sully, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thanks, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm delightful. Thank you for asking.
Wonderful. How is Dallas this afternoon? You're in Dallas?
I am. I'm just a little bit north of Dallas, Texas. As I look out my window, there are 9. There are 30 people walking around in cowboy hats. They're shooting themselves. They're shooting their horses.
Yes. Of course.
You know, everything that you would expect about Texas is 100% true.
Oh, that's cool.
None of that's true. There's actually no. So it's not. Yeah, Dallas is actually pretty metropolitan, so we're not all kind of like married to our cousin.
Yeah.
Which is good. Good.
That is good. Yeah, I was just going to tell you we've just got 15 kangaroos hopping down the road. And that's
and
cool.
drop bears, right?
Several drop bears overnight.
Right.
Hey, so you've got some cool Australian connections, which we might talk about a bit later on, which is great. And you're doing some great things building. But before you were building, I'm guessing you were playing guitar. Is that true?
Oh yeah, very very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started kind of playing guitar when I was about 8. And I mean, nothing, not like serious or anything like that. I just I saw a picture of Ace Frehley from Kiss, and my sister had an acoustic guitar, and so she was supposed to take lessons, and she never did, and so I kind of swiped that, and my grandfather bought me a Mel Bay guitar book with some chords and some little, notes, and here's the names of the strings and blah blah blah. And so I would just kind of mess around with that. But I probably didn't start getting serious and playing until I was about 12 when I got like my first electric.
Cool. And what was that?
Oh, that was it was it was kind of a hand me down from my uncle. It was at my grandmother's house, and it was 60s Japanese factory, like the Matsumoku Ibanez, weird Stratty looking funky pearl pickguard
Nice.
knobs and switches, and it was a brand called Maxitone.
Okay.
And it was kind of like the Teisco Del Reys and things like that. But yeah, so it was one of those, and I was happy to have it. But then I also, I got into Van Halen, and I was already into Kiss, and I wanted to put white tape on my red
nice.
Strat looking thing, and yeah, actually that's there are photos of that somewhere that will never see the light of day. But yeah, man, I was very much influenced by Ace Frehley and later Eddie Van Halen, and then definitely Randy Rhoads is my biggest musical influence, and actually is a guitar builder as well. I wouldn't build guitars if it weren't for Randy Rhoads.
Yeah.
Because the white V that with the pinstripes on it that Grover made for him, I had this rock calendar. It's like 1982. It's a 1982 calendar, and it was a calendar from this rock radio station called The Loop in Chicago, and that's where I'm originally from.
Okay.
And it's like 1 month it's the Rolling Stones, and the next month it's Joan Jett, and then this 1 month it's Ozzy Osbourne. And all I can see of Ozzy is, you can kind of see him from like the chest up, and he's got this like red sequin top, and he's got this crazy face on. It's a live shot, and he's got in his hands, he's got the head of his guitar player, and his head's kind of like pulled back. And I'm kind of miming this for our video chat, which works great on a podcast. Works great on a podcast. You guys will love this. And so, but so I couldn't see his face of the guitar player, but all I could see was this white V with pinstripes, and I'm like, what is that? That was the coolest guitar I have ever seen in my life. It was one of those moments like when I first saw a picture of Ace Frehley, and the guitar, smoke's pouring out of his guitar. And I'm like, what is that? And, being a kid and being into superheroes and stuff, Kiss kind of looked like superheroes, and nobody knew what they looked like at that time.
Yes.
And I also learned that and I actually learned this thanks to the AC/DC too, because obviously they were huge around that time. This is like late 70s. And I mean, they're still huge, but you know what I'm saying? I learned that girls liked guys that played guitar. And I'm like, wait a minute, really? Like, I'm 8. What am I going to do? I knew that I liked girls and I liked superheroes. And so there's Kiss, and people like Kiss. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to play guitar.
Awesome.
I'm just going to be a Kiss. That seems like what I should do. And and so then I wound up, 25 or so years later in a Kiss tribute band for a year, which was fun. But
right. Did you do the makeup?
Oh yeah, dude, makeup, explosions, everything. So cool. I had smoke pouring out of my guitar. It was fun.
No way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there is video of that. I will send that to you.
Please. That's the best. That's the best because well, I'm a similar vintage, I think, because Ace was the guy. He was the first guy I noticed. His fingers were doing stuff, and like cool stuff was coming out of the guitar.
Right.
So when I saw that was my first cognizant guitar solo moment, I think.
Sure.
And then it's how does he know where to put his fingers? That was something I had to find out much later. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a little while, and I would wager a guess that Ace probably also wonders himself, where do I have to put my fingers again? But I mean, maybe. It's maybe a little bit, but you can't deny that he's influenced millions of people for better or for worse to pick up the instrument. So
Absolutely.
so that's good.
That's cool. My when I first got my first electric, I got it from a pawn shop, and I bought this guitar. I thought it looked like Ace's Les Paul, and it looked nothing like it, but it was this vaguely sunburst.
Sure.
Another Japanese kind of freaky log sort of thing, maybe like yours. It was a Sakai. It was a cross between an SG and a Mustang, and it was crazy, but it was sort of sunburst.
And it was yours.
It was mine, yeah. It was good. And
cool.
I thought if I jack the action up really high, I'll be able to bend strings because I'll fit under the other strings. But
that's how you do it. Yeah, you push up, so you push the strings up away from the neck.
Way. That's it.
Yeah, it's why you have to tune down really low. That's what we learned from Black Sabbath. So you got to tune it down really low so you can push the strings up really high.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was my first mod experience. But what about you? Did you start messing around with, apart from the pinstripes? Did you start messing around with the guitar?
Yeah. I mean, so that guitar, the red Japanese thing, it served me well for a few years. But also around that time, growing up, like early 80s, I'm 12, 13 or so. And everybody's got custom guitars. We already talked about Ed. We talked about Randy, and just like all the bands that I listened to, Jacksons and Charvels, and they've got crazy paint jobs and stuff. And so I would put little tape on my guitar to have it, have stripes on it. And there was something for me even back then that was really interested in the idea of building your own guitar, or just building your own guitar and having something cool. So I always kind of wanted to do something like that. And also like you, when I was a kid, I wanted a Les Paul really, really badly because of Ace Frehley. And my stepdad, he played guitar. And I remember the day, this is just so burned in my mind. I was so pissed, angry. This was probably like 1984. Gibson just unveiled the new line of Les Pauls, which was the Les Paul Studio. And at that time, studios had full body binding. They had binding around the fretboard. They had dot inlays. And I had that ad like on my walls and stuff, like next to all of my Motley Crue posters and stuff like that. And I wanted this Les Paul Studio. It's like starting at $749. And I'm like, I'm 13, 14. When am I ever going to get $749? And, I remember showing it to my grandparents going, hey, look at this guitar. It's like only $749, and I'm trying to like, oh, well, maybe we'll get that for you for Christmas. But no, that didn't happen. So this is a new guitar. And so my stepdad comes home from work late one night. It's later than he usually did. And he's got a guitar case in his hand. And it's this big honking plastic molded crazy looking guitar case. It just says Gibson on the side. Pops it open, and it's a Les Paul Studio.
Wow.
And it wasn't for me, so I was really, really upset. And so he bought it for him. And he was just kind of a bedroom player. He'd go to work and he'd come home, and he'd after everybody kind of wind down for the night, he'd play his Chuck Berry riffs. And I remember sitting in my room on my 60s Japanese copy trying to learn how to play Round and Round. And and I hear him, playing the opening lick for Johnny Be Good like over and over and over. And I'll be like, I'll never be like you, man. I'm never going to be like, and I'm, whatever, life happens. But so instead of me sitting on my couch playing Chuck Berry riffs, I'll play Over the Mountain. So, but it's the same thing. It happens, But,
yeah. That's great. That's great.
So when he would go to work, I would like sneak into their room, and I would take this little studio and I would play it, and I'm like, oh my god, it's a Les Paul. It's so cool. And so
did you have to sneak it back in the case?
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. It was super, super. Don't let anybody find out.
Yeah.
so like that Christmas that year, or right around Christmas time that year, I had found out that there was a music store that was selling Les Paul kits,
Hmm.
and I'm like, and they were $2.99, and so I called up the store, and I'm like, you have these Les Paul kits? And they're like, yep, we got a bunch of them, $2.99. I'm like, well, who made them? Like, what kind of guitars are they? I mean, does it come with a logo or anything? He's like, no. I'm like, well, who makes them? He's like, Gibson. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, they're Gibson Les Paul kits. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll tell my mom. And so, I'm begging and pleading, like, please let me have this Les Paul kit for Christmas. And it was one of those moments. I'll never forget that Christmas. We go up to my grandma's for Christmas, and I see it. It's this guitar triangle shaped box, and it's wrapped up, and I'm like, oh, I got it. And it's the last thing that the last present of the day, and I'm just like waiting and waiting and waiting.
Yeah.
And I was so, it was the greatest. And so it was a set neck guitar kit. And it had a carved top, and it absolutely was no way was this a Gibson. But it was just like a studio. It had full body binding. It had the fretboard was bound. It had a Gibson headstock. It had dot inlays. But it was like, it wasn't mahogany. It was like alder and maple with an ash top or something like that. But anyway, and then some of my relatives, they got me some pickups, DiMarzio pickups, a Super 2 and a Super Distortion. Cool. And I got like a subscription to Guitar Player magazine. I'm like, oh, this is the greatest day.
Wow.
It was the best. It was just the best. And so I'm like, sweet, I'm going to build a Les Paul. And so my stepdad and I, we glued the neck in and strung it up. And we painted it. Initially, we did like a cherry sunburst kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I decided, well, since I'm into metal, I have to have a black guitar. So I masked off all the binding and I spray painted it black. And, this is 85, so it's not like there are online tutorials on how to spray a guitar or anything that I had access to. So, I didn't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just, I'm spray painting this guitar with, spray lacquer. And, it was fine. And so I get it to the point where it's ready for assembly. So I took it to this shop that was local to me, and the guy that did repairs there, his name was Steve. And Steve was cool. I mean, you got to be cool if your name's Steve anyway. But so so Steve was cool, and he had long hair, and he was like the cool guy to take lessons from, and he grew up with Glenn Tipton of Judas Priest, and so like it was a cool guy. And he was making parts guitars for my friends that would take lessons from him, and it was. So I take this guitar to Steve, and I'm like, can you, kind of finish this? Because I don't know how to solder or whatever. And so he's like, you built this? I'm like, yeah, sir. And so he's kind of looking, and he's like, well, okay, it's all right. And he kind of like looks down the neck, and he's like, oh, buddy, this neck is so twisted. It's never gonna play. I was just crushed. It was just like I got a puppy and then someone shot it. It was terrible. And it was the worst. So like that. Oh, no. Right. But
were you playing it already though? Did you know the neck was twisted?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it had some strings on it, but I mean, again, I'm like 14.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about anything, and I'm trying to play it, and it's I don't know how to level frets or anything like that. So it's like buzzing here and there and stuff like that. And, it was just the worst. And, but also by that time I did get my first good guitar, which was like it was a 1983 BC Rich NJ Warlock, and it was sweet.
Awesome.
And, yeah, dude. 'Cause like, I was Motley Crue. It just finally, I discovered Motley Crue, and I'm like, there's the video for "Looks That Kill," and Mick's got that like white Warlock, and I'm like, yeah, that's the coolest. And so I get this Warlock, and it was the coolest. So now I'm like, 14 or whatever, and now I've got many guitars. I have a collection. Let me show them to you. But so I'm still, bummed that I don't get to have this Les Paul.
Yeah.
And it became like a lifelong kind of thing. But I think that's kind of where I got my first real taste of building. The guy Steve, he wound up maybe like a year or so after the neck twist incident, he opened up his own guitar store really close to my house, and I used to just go and hang out there like a stray cat. And he was always super, super great to me. And he and his now wife, I mean, they were just, I don't know, 28 or so, 29, and they're opening up a store and they're trying to cut their own path. And I'm just hanging out like a stray cat, just playing guitars and trying not to get in the way of things. And Steve would let me hang out with him while he's doing repairs, and so I'd watch him, just fix stuff, and I'd ask him questions, and he would always answer me in a manner as if I knew what he was talking about. And I never knew what the hell he was talking about, but it was still kind of cool to be like, it's not like, well, I have to do this so this happens. It was just, and then the next little, I gotta, it's got a high fret. We gotta, fix this here. I'm like, well, in my brain, I'm like, oh, high fret. That's not good. But what's a high fret? We don't need to worry about that right now. So I would just kind of watch and absorb things. And, as a result of those times, I've always kind of tinkered with stuff, and I started, making my own parts guitars. When I was, I had worked on a couple of guitars for a friend of mine when I was like 17, 18. But then started kind of seriously making just guitars out of prefab parts in maybe like 2001 or so. And you get a body and a neck off of eBay, and you realize that the neck that you bought doesn't go with this particular body because this body's cut for a 24 fret neck and you've got a 22 fret Strat neck, and that's not going to work, and blah 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 blah. But it's just part of the process. And then I started cutting bodies and making my own guitar bodies rather. And then, started making my own necks, and years later, I still have all 10 fingers, and nice. I'm really happy about that.
That's cool. That's very cool. So
long story.
That's great, Bart. That's great. And I don't know, a lot of the guys I talk to, mostly players, but so far on our show, but people will always talk about their mentors, or this guy showed me this, or I'll never forget this guy who took me under his wing. That's cool. You had the cool guy Steve.
Yeah, dude. Steve's pretty great. I mean, they still have the store, and
really?
whenever I go, whenever I go back home to Chicago, I always go and see him.
That's
and
awesome.
It's wonderful. So everybody, you've got to. Obviously, we have, sometimes you have a great teacher or someone that's just made such an impact on you.
Yeah.
And Steve was one of those guys, and super, super grateful. I was super fortunate because there are also a bunch of other kids like my age that took lessons there. And, and like I said, we all just hung out there like stray cats, and they were just, we weren't buying anything. I mean, I eventually like as a 16th birthday present to myself, I commissioned like a custom build from him. And it was just like a Strat, just a white Strat. And I wanted it initially to look like Jakey Lee's white Strat that he had with the black pickguard and in the rosewood fretboard and all that. And the design kind of morphed to something completely different. We're just white, and it's got a pearlite guard and 3 singles and a maple neck. But it's got the neck on this thing. And being a parts guitar, I have no idea who actually made this neck. It is absolutely like the greatest neck ever. And it's got a Strat head on it, but it does not have like a Fender back shape like at all. It's got a nice like a 12-inch radius fretboard. And when I started when they became a Jackson dealer at the store, and so they get brand new soloists and Rhodes with paint jobs that were insane. And this is again like late 80s. So all kinds of awesome stuff, and I would get to play all of them. And I would play these soloists, and I'm like, man, this neck is awesome. And I realized it's very similar to the neck on the guitar that Steve built for me that I still have. And so it's kind of a lot of, if I just go and make a neck just without anyone's preferences taken into consideration, it's always going to wind up turning out pretty much like that. And it's like you can pick up one of my guitars, and it's like, it will feel like an old Charvel or a Jackson or something like that. And that's kind of where all the guitars that I liked played like that. So it's kind of how it happens.
Yeah, cool. So what your stuff strikes me as you're the generation. You're not trying to make the greatest L series Strat ever made. You're a good 20, 30 years after that. So, like you're saying, the Jackson, the Charvel era really had a big deal in your
It
development.
really did. It really did. And especially for me, with Randy and being such a Randy Rhoads fan, I mean,
Yeah.
like my favorite guitars of Randy's were his Jacksons,
Hmm.
the white prototype, and then the second prototype, which became the Rhodes. And I mean, obviously the polka dot V is very iconic, but
Yeah.
it's not. For me, it was his Jacksons. And then,
Yes.
Robin Crosby had these huge red, V's, and it was, like I remember reading this article in Guitar for the Practicing Musician, which was a magazine, kids. We used to get these guitar magazines. They're paper, and you flip
Yeah.
through them. They would have pictures and transcriptions of songs.
I remember that
And I
one.
remember,
Yeah.
yeah, and Warren DeMartini and Robin Crosby were on the cover,
Uh-huh.
and Robin's got his big red pointy King V, and I'm reading and all this stuff, and you learn that the King V was named after Robin because Robin's nickname was King,
Oh,
and I'm
okay,
like,
really?
man, yeah,
Cool.
yeah, don't listen to what Dave Mustaine says, kids. It was named after Robin King Crosby.
Awesome.
And the story behind that guitar, the whole how the King V came about. Uh, it depends on who you ask, but there were in the very early days of Rat, Robin had a Rhodes,
Hmm.
and Robin was a big guy. He was like 6'5",
Right.
and a Rhodes looked tiny
Yeah,
on
it's
him.
very small,
It looked like
very
just a
compact.
ukulele.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
there was a guy.
it looked big on Randy though,
Yeah,
because he was
yeah.
tiny.
So what a ukulele. Yeah, I mean Randy was like 5'7", 5'8", and
Yeah.
like
Wow.
100 pounds. If you're lucky. And and there was a guy, a guitar player named Dave Linsk, who played in Overkill, I believe. And right around this happened right around the same time. The idea was take the long wing of a Rhodes and double it.
Hmm.
So it was before there was a King V. It was just called a double Rhodes.
Oh, okay.
And so that long wing of a Rhodes is pretty long. So if you double it, you've got a good size V
Yeah.
for a tall person. And they eventually got smaller as they kind of went into production, because I mean I've had a double Rhodes and I've played them, and I'm 6'3", and they kind of work out fine for me. But if you're kind of
Okay.
on the shorter side, that bottom wing will like hit you in the shin if you're standing up and playing. But anyway, so I was so into all that stuff, and Charvels and Jacksons, and it's all I ever wanted were just cool Jackson V's. And I remember I had all these rock posters all over my wall, but I also had like this poster of a Charvel ad. It was a Charvel Jackson ad, and had Grover's picture on it, and he's holding a neck. It was had a Charvel pointy headstock on it, and it said, the caption was, "We don't pay them, they just play them." It's like,
Yeah,
we
I remember
don't
that.
pay people.
Yes.
So fun story about that ad, and I never knew this until like a couple months ago, because Grover told me about it, and this is a little foreshadowing. But that ad was taking a swipe at Vivian Campbell,
Oh, okay.
because so when Vivian was in Dio,
Mm.
they made a bunch of Charvels for him,
Okay.
and they had like the Holy Diver album cover on it, and then there was a white Strat that had like red squares with skulls in it, and then there was another one that had like the sort of like the Last in Line album cover airbrushed on it, and they also made him a Jackson Les Paul, which was kind of cool, but it had a Kaler on it, the poor guy. And so Vivian was kind of, at that time, those first couple Dio records, he was a big deal.
Yeah.
And he was also in his very early 20s, and maybe had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And the Kramer came to him and wanted him to endorse the Night Swan model.
Yeah. Which was
And they
the Buddy Blaze thing, I think.
the Buddy Blaze thing, which is
Yeah,
like
cool.
a bridge and a middle pickup only, and it was kind of weird. And
Yeah.
but hey, whatever. So they back a truck of money up to Vivian's house, and it's see you later, Jackson.
The Kramer
and
truck.
so the Kramer truck. It's
That's
actually
great.
driven by Kramer from Seinfeld. It was very cutting edge. And so that whole "we don't pay them, they just play them" ad was taking a shot at Vivian
Wow.
Campbell.
There you go.
Yeah,
I love those ads. I remember all those guitar magazines and the ads and stuff.
yeah.
I remember
I still
staring
have
at
all
them.
of them. Every
Awesome.
single guitar magazine I bought, I still have,
Wow,
which
that's
is kind
cool.
of frightening and sad. But what are you gonna do?
Awesome. So so when you crossed over from, I guess, just fixing stuff and making your own stuff, when was that actual point? Okay, now there's Sully Guitars. When did you launch as like a brand in your own right?
Well, I started. So when I was doing, the parts guitars, I would, they had Sully logos on them, um, and I would sell them to friends for, not a lot of money for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But like the idea for Sully Guitars, quite frankly, started when I had that Les Paul kit when I was 14.
Yeah, really.
And it was one of those things where it's just like this is, any custom guitar that I play is going to be a Sully guitar. I'm like, it's ridiculous because this is what you think about when you're 14.
Of course, yeah.
If you're a flawed individual like myself. But so that was always kind of, But so when I started, cutting my own bodies, that was maybe like a year or so later, like 2002 or so. They were Sully's, and they always kind of have been since
Cool.
then. And thankfully, they're much, much, much better guitars now.
Sure.
And that's good. But it was always kind of a thing.
Uh-huh.
It was always kind of a thing.
Awesome. So your stuff, like we mentioned, it's got a very like a hot rodded 80s kind of vibe, but I mean very modern as well. So
Thank you.
for sure you're working with well-known kind of ideas, I guess, like set neck
Sure.
guitars, 24 3/4 scale, and then you got 25.5-inch bolt-ons,
Right.
all that kind of
Yeah.
landscape.
Generally for me, even like if I've all of the guitars for me are, unless somebody specifically orders a short scale like a 24 3/4 scale, they'll be 25.5 no matter what it is.
Okay.
Because for me, I learned because I had a few Les Pauls over the years, and I never bonded with them, and I was always really frustrated by this.
Mhm.
And I eventually realized that it was the scale length.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was because like past the 12th fret, it gets real congested.
Okay.
For me, I mean, I'm not the biggest person in the world, but I'm also not the smallest person
Sure.
in the world. And to me, 25.5 scale, it seemed right. And it's also, kind of what I grew up with, because I had the guitars that stayed with me. Like the Warlock's gone, the Les Paul kit never actually, had life breathed into it, so to speak.
Yeah.
So most of the guitars that I kept were actually 25.5 scale.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was actually one of the things that I was kind of thinking of when I was designing what became the 71, my single cut model.
Yeah.
The whole point of that guitar was to address all of the issues that I had with a Les Paul.
Okay. Yeah.
And when I say issues that I had, it's not like, oh, I think it's a crap guitar, because that's just dumb. But I had enough of them where I'm just like, man, I really, it's an iconic shape. It's got its own sound. It's got, just one of those things. You think, rock and roll, you think of Les Paul or a few others. And so I just started to with basing the idea on 25.5 scale, and then so I had a picture of a Les Paul, and I was just drawing over the picture of the body, and kept refining it. And I spent honestly about 4 years on the design.
Wow.
Not every day,
Sure.
I would make some tweaks to the design, and you kind of get it to the point where it's like, okay, well, it lives on paper. I've got to commit this to some other kind of physical material, so I started making some body templates, and that was kind of the next phase where it's like, well, okay, maybe that cutaway doesn't quite look right. And, you keep refining, but, while I'm doing that, I've still got guitars to build. So, I kind of, I'll mess around with this a little bit. We'll kind of put it over here. So the initial drawing of the 71 model was, I want to say, in July of 2009. and the first guitar was completed in like March of 2013.
Okay. Wow.
So I started in like January of 2013, where I'm just like, all right, I've got this. I've got all of this stuff kind of sorted out to where I wanted it, at least to where I could, make some prototype guitars. And yeah, so kind of refining refining here and there as I build them. And I'm happy to say, I finally got it where I want it. So
awesome! It is such a cool design. It's
thank you.
People will have to look it up. It's not going to be helpful if I try and describe it, but I will. It's like
it's got a curvy bit and a pointy bit. It's got
Yeah.
some strings.
It's got
Looks like a big Tylenol. Yeah.
That's super cool. So it's a single cut Les Paul kind of vibe, but yeah, the whole profile's been rejigged. It's beautiful.
Well, you're also, so you'll see that. Thank you. And kind of going back to something that you had said, in that, where a lot of the guitars that I build are kind of they're rooted in my own history, which is
Yes.
with, the hot rod guitars of the 80s, but they do have a more modern look to them. So I'm not making, at least in my own eyes, mind, and sensibility, I'm not making Strat knockoffs with Floyds on them. They are,
Yeah.
I've got a super Strat style, but it's got a whole bunch of contours on the back that not many other people do, or if they do, fine, cool, but it's not really in the majority.
Yeah.
And I really try and like to bring a little bit more of my own kind of sensibilities, as opposed to just putting Strat heads on anything, because that's
Yeah.
to my mind not cool, because that's, if you want a Strat, go buy a Fender, and many people are perfectly happy with those, and that's great.
For sure.
But yeah, and so it's, I try and kind of straddle the line between somewhat traditional and somewhat modern, in that I'm probably not going to come out in the foreseeable future with something that's like a Chapman stick. You know what I mean? It's but I love what guys like Ken Parker is doing now with Ken Parker arch tops. But also, when I saw the first Parker Fly in 1992, again at Steve's at Park Avenue Music in Lombard, Illinois, they were just called the Parker Fly. It wasn't a Fly Deluxe. It wasn't they had one guitar, and I remember seeing that. I'm like, what the hell is that? And so, go ahead and check it out. And so I go and grab it off of the hanger, and you go and you taking guitars off of wall hangers, you're kind of prepared for that guitar to weigh a certain amount, in your mind. And so I grab this thing, and it's so light. I'm like, whoa, what is this? And so he's like, yeah, it's just, the whole thing is basswood, and it's wrapped in carbon fiber, and the fretboard is ebonite or ebonol or something. It's whatever they made bowling balls out of. It was the first guitar that I'm aware of that was brought to market that had stainless steel frets.
Okay.
And
they were top mounted, weren't they? They didn't have the tangs or anything.
No,
they didn't.
On. They're just glued in place. I'm like, what? I was talking with the guy that the company that I get my stainless steel frets from.
Yeah.
Is a company called Jeskar, and the guy that owns it, we were talking about frets, and he kind of helped that stuff out. He's like, yeah, those things were not, like, there were no fret slots. I'm like, how'd that work? Cause if you get like a lifting up fret end or things, what happens if they're glued in? I mean, sometimes glue releases over time. I mean, but I remember feeling the feel of that guitar is that, regardless of how you feel about the aesthetics of it, because I understand that it's not for everyone, the thing played just effortlessly, and it had this slinky feel to it, and I think it was a combination of the density of the fretboard, but also the stainless steel frets. And when I started using stainless steel frets, like after I did my first stainless steel fret install, I'm looking at that guitar right now, and I played it, and I'm like, it had that slinky feel, and I'm like, that's right, that's what the Fly was like. I'm like, okay, so this is the only fret wire I will ever want to use, and because it just feels so slick and it just gets out of your way. And the thing that's always been very important for me as a builder and as a player, is that a guitar should look great, it should sound great, but when you put the guitar on, it shouldn't be the focal point.
Uh-huh.
It should get out of your way. It should let a guitar, as cool as they are, guitars are tools.
Yeah.
That's it to me, and I think building them, I probably romanticize guitars maybe a little bit less. When I start building guitars, I started looking at them in a different light, and not in a critical light, but more in a way of it's a tool, and you want to make that tool as great as you possibly can. But the guitar, it needs to have the artist, otherwise it's kind of worthless.
Sure.
I mean, they're cool to look at. I'll look at them all day long, but it really needs to help the artist, the musician, to communicate what's on his or her mind. And the easier that you can make that communication, the better for everybody, because you get to enjoy music, and that's good. So a lot of the things that I've done that's been really important to me actually happen a lot on the back of the guitar body itself. I spend a lot of time, contouring out the backside of a cutaway, or contouring out like the back of a heel, because one of the things I've joked with friends, clunky neck heels are for jerks, and there are, I mean, you go grab a Strat. It's
absolutely.
Bonk. It's
Yes.
a big, and you don't think about it because it's what you're used to. And for me, if I go and play a Strat, or I'll play around, and I'm like, it doesn't really bother me, but it wouldn't be what I would want to have for myself.
Yeah, for sure.
So so cool. So how much can I contour this out and it still feel good in your hand? Because you can contour something out like way too much, and then you've got like nothing underneath the hand, and it's a whole different kind of organic geometry thing, and that's a different kind of conversation. And I've probably lost all of your listeners, and I'm so sorry. But
I think they're into it. It's okay.
we'll stop here. We'll let everybody take time to stretch your legs. We're going to regroup. We're going to wake up. We're going to feel good about everything. It's going to be great. But no, that's really important to me is how guitar feels on someone. It's got to look cool. But so I try and kind of find that balance. And so that's kind of where I live is, I may come up with a design and it looks great on paper, and then I go and start building it, and I'm like, I've got this big neck heel. How am I going to get around this? And I can't necessarily extend it up like you would on this particular style of body. So I make it, it's a lot of fun problem solving and things of that nature, because that's kind of where I spend a lot of my creativity now.
Okay.
While I, will still pick up my guitar and play and stuff like that, and I'm happy to do so most of the time. Right now, I'm just so rusty, where it's just kind of, I'm going to spend a bunch of time to knock off rust, and I'm like, oh God, you suck. But think back to remember when you were good, and then that's just like, it's a whole spiral I don't want to get into. But self-loathing and whatever. But so I can spend my time being creative with a belly contour, which sounds so much more exciting, of course. Yeah, great job, Sully. But great story. Never one of my best, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Anyway.
but that's part of the intricacies, I guess, of what you do and making it work and making it your own thing, rather than just, you said, slapping together a super Strat that's like everyone else's. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think so. Because you got to start out somewhere, and and that's fine. But you've got to progress from somewhere. I don't understand. And I guess, and I don't have to, because I'm not this person, but there are folks who are just perfectly happy with making copies, and I don't mean that in a derogatory term in this particular sense.
Yeah, sure.
Copies of guitars that are 60, 50 years old.
Yes. Yeah.
Down to the screw, and I kind of get it to a certain extent, but I think that, as a musician, you always want to progress. You always want to find your own voice. And actually, in listening to, we were talking before we started, I was listening to Gretchen Menn's episode of the Guitar Speak podcast, and she had quoted Miles Davis saying that it takes and I'm doing it, it's a terrible, I'll have to paraphrase it, but it takes the longest amount of time for a musician to sound like themselves. Where you start playing and, if I pick up a guitar and you can say, play the solo in Firehouse by Kiss, it'll sound just like Ace Frehley, I promise. And when I was doing the Kiss band stuff, it was really hard to play guitar in another voice. It was like, no matter what I would play, it would sound like Ace.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would get very frustrating, but it's the same thing with building. You start where you are, and with what makes you happy, and that's cool. And I guess if some people are content with just building what makes you happy, I guess that's okay. But it sounds so stupid when I say that, because everyone's saying yes, because that is a stupid statement. But what I mean is that you need to progress and grow and find your own voice and your own creativity, because I think that's what's important to me, to be able to do that. So I want to make tools for artists so they can create whatever is on their mind. So.
Yeah, cool. We may have already covered this perhaps around about, but you posted an article recently on, maybe it was on the Luthierist Facebook page or whatever, and it was titled "The Difficulties of Innovating Guitar Makers and the Burden of Nostalgia."
Yeah,
it's
tough, dude.
That's a big topic, and it covered a lot about the Ken Parker story, who you've already mentioned. Well, what does that mean to you at Sully Guitars? That is there a burden of nostalgia for you? Is there a difficulty of innovation?
Yes. Yeah, there is, because there are a lot of people, and I kind of mitigate some of that burden by kind of, like I was talking about, working in that area where if you like some of the more traditional styles, I've got something for you. I'm not building you a Telly, but I have a modern stylized version of that shape that's going to be more comfortable for you to play. It's a little pointier, but so I can kind of live over there. But yes, let's acknowledge the past, and we'll give you a flavor of that, but I'm going to try and take you by the hand and pull you a little bit forward, where we're going to talk about playability and what are the things that I can do to improve playability. So I think that it's challenging. I'm sure, or at least maybe it's just me. When I was a kid, I drew all the time, and I would draw cartoons of, whatever. And I draw cartoons of Kiss, and I draw cartoons of other rock stars, and I would draw cartoons of me as a rock star when I'm, whatever. And, and then I would, design my own cool guitars and stuff. And they were, they looked like they were drawn by a 14-year-old kid who probably listened to some metal. It's like, it's pointy and it makes no sense and it looks terrible. But, we still have a little bit of that spirit. So you have to kind of, make sure that looks okay, and having a good design sense helps. But, when it comes down to it, man, there are some people that just like, I want a Les Paul shape. I want a Strat shape. I want a Telly shape. I want a PRS shape. Or people say, I want a Rhodes. I want this. I want what I already know, but I want you to put your spin on it, provided it looks just like what I already know. And early on, I would build. I had a model that was a traditional Strat silhouette.
Okay.
It had some things on it that I liked better, but I phased it out, and I started phasing out more of the models that are kind of just have that silhouette. So it's like I may call this model I don't know, I might call this model a Jeff, but someone says, well, it's got a Strat shape. So I want that Strat. Well, I don't make Strats. And so it's this whole semantics thing. So I started discontinuing things that were, that kind of followed that pattern, I guess, if that makes sense. And I will continue to do that as I introduce the replacements of those models. Okay. Because I want to put my own spin on things and I want to put my own creativity into things. So long story, geez, this is a terrible answer to a pretty simple question. It is challenging as a guitar builder to build something new and fresh that people don't instantly want to kill with fire. Yes. You know, and when I finally had the final design of a 71 and I kind of, built the first couple and kind of, released them into the wild, it's kind of interesting to, because I know what I was thinking when I was designing it. And I know, I remember that process. And it's interesting to hear, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so great, what people say that it looks like. Okay. And it's kind of like when you meet someone and they say, "Oh my God, you know who you totally look like, or you know who you remind me of." And it's always like a famous person or whomever, but it's never something that you want to hear. Uh-huh. it's like I look like that person. Oh, that sucks. They're trying to be nice, but you have that same thing. So I get a little bit of that. And one of the things that that came up, it comes up from time to time when they see the design of the 71. Is they mentioned the Rick Turner guitar that he makes for Lindsey Buckingham. Yeah, okay, yep. And I get it, unless you actually look at a 71 and then look at the Rick Turner guitar, because I mean, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. And like Lindsey Buckingham is on my top 5 list, so I would love to get I would love to get a 71 to Lindsey Buckingham. Mm-hmm. That would be the greatest. And one of the dealers near me, one of my dealers, they actually have one of those Lindsey guitars, and it's tiny and it's funny. It's like it doesn't look like other things that people will see. And I think the most common one that I get, and I totally understand where this comes from, because this is a little bit on purpose, is people say it looks like a Les Paul and an Iceman. Okay. Which that bottom kind of sweepy curve. Kind of. A bit Iceman. Okay. It is to a certain extent, and some people will also mention the Fernandez Ravel, which was a guitar that I liked, but I wanted to really like it when they came out with it. It was kind of like a Les Paul, but it was a little pointy. And Dave Kushner from Velvet Revolver, he had one, the green one. Yep. Yeah. And I thought it was a cool guitar, but I didn't think it was quite finished. And as I was designing the 71, I had the Ravel in mind, and of course I didn't want to use that cutaway, because I didn't want to use that cutaway, and I didn't want to, whatever. But it was part of a very small part of the inspiration, not in the actual design, but in the steps of actually creating the design. Mm-hmm. It was like, man, I really want to love that guitar. I would change this, and then it wouldn't be a Ravel anymore. Okay. But so that was part of it. And the Iceman too. And when I was sharing the design with some people, somebody said that is a guitar designed by a Kiss fan. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. That's cool. And and I can see that. Yeah. And I had an Iceman. I love the Ibanez Iceman. Okay. So there was a little bit of an influence. Actually, the part that is most, from my memory, that was most influenced by the Iceman was, if you're looking at the guitar face first, or face, I don't know how else you're going to look at something. If you're looking at it, you're looking at the body, and if you kind of divide it into quadrants, you've got the bass side upper bout, you've got the bass side lower bout, the treble side upper bout, the treble side lower bout. Okay. We're following this. Bass side lower bout, before it comes to the point, it kind of flares away from the waist, somewhat Iceman-ish. Okay. But it has, as it comes off the waist, it's got a bit of a straight line like the Iceman does, and it kind of resolves itself somewhat Iceman-esque. And it wasn't really like, hey, I need to work the Iceman in somehow, but that's also part of my guitar DNA, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
Because,
yeah.
Paul Stanley's Iceman, dude, come on, that thing was amazing. That thing is just too cool. So, regardless of what anyone might think of Kiss, and you're not, it's all good. I have my own issues with them too, but that was a cool guitar. That was a cool ass guitar.
Absolutely. So, I'm with you, man. All the Kiss guitars and catalog, I'm okay with. I'm totally up for. That's awesome.
Sure.
All right, that's the end of part 1 of my conversation with Sully. Now, you got to realise, Sully's got this huge tattoo of Ace Frehley on his forearm. He is a serious fan. You know what? I should have asked Sully what he thought about the spaceman persona being franchised out. Now Tommy Thayer covers that role. I might email him and see if I can report back when we get to episode 2. Now, in episode 2, Sully talks about his relationship with Grover Jackson and GJ2 Guitars, and how GJ2 not only helped create a limited run of Sully guitars, but how Jon actually got to sit in with Grover and hang out and work on these guitars alongside him, which is such a great story. Now, Sully's on Instagram and Facebook, so you can totally see heaps of cool shots of those very guitars that we're talking about today. By the way, we are on Instagram and Facebook as well, the Guitar Speak Podcast. You can also get our episodes at guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher. And hey, if you're enjoying the episodes, please share them around your social networks. That makes a huge difference to us in getting the word out. Now, we've got some great things coming up on the Guitar Speak podcast. Even this last week, a couple of really great things fell into place. I don't like to mention names until the interviews are in the can and ready to share with you, but trust me, there's good stuff coming up. So yeah, hook into our different medias to follow what's going on, to keep up to date with us. All right, hey, thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time for the next edition of the Guitar Speak podcast. Bye now.